Alright guys, it's been a while since I've been around because I'm still recovering. Yeah, I had to go to work last week, but basically I went to go to work and then I sat at home in my chair and played music the rest of the night because I was dead. So, these are the Gt40ps we're finishing up. We were having problems getting any decent springs and cups and things like that that were spec'd for the Jones cam. So I had to go to an old standby. I'll get the number. Okay, 987-16 is a comp number. I started using this number spring late 80s roller. So I know they're going to do the job. I believe I have to go back in my emails and my texts. I believe they need to be at 140 pounds load at 1.8 inch, something like that. For the last, I don't know, 25, 30 years, depending upon the application, if they're going to get beat hard, I usually go about 10 pounds more than the camshaft manufacturer's specs. Why would you do that, Charlie? Well, when I was very young and very stupid, the original 383 that was in the Chevelle had nasty problems. Breaking studs, bending push rods, blowing push rods right through rocker arms, all kinds of issues. Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was using that was a big Crowler flat tappet cam, and I spec'd it with the right springs and blah blah blah, and then ran it more RPM than it probably was designed for. Let's put it that way. So what I wound up doing is, little by little, I figured it out, but it took a while. You know, I upgraded the studs, I upgraded the push rods, I upgraded the rockers, and I still had problems until I put more spring under it. And then all of a sudden, it was like magic. No more issues with any spring valve train problems. So I go about 10 pounds over, just in case you miss a shift or your tranny blows or you blow something else up and you go up against the rev limiter. It's a good way to be. Now these pads were already machined from the machine shop that put in the heavy bronze wall guides. They did a pretty good job, but they weren't quite big enough diameter for these cups. So what I needed to do was machine it out so the cups would fit. And it worked out really nice because the cup is actually the almost identical size of this, so it kind of just fits right in there, and I'd rather have that. Now, the only reason you need a cup, all right, did you see these have a little bit of play? What would happen if we put that all together and just let that fly like that? Well, valve train dynamics being what they are, that's going to move around, okay? So it's going to twist the spring a little bit in one direction or another. Now, is that enough to cause problems? It's more than Charlie would like to see. So what I'm doing is I'm epoxying them in place. So they have to have a rough texture on them. These cups I actually took against my longboard. All right, you can see they've been scratched up with the longboard. And I'm going to epoxy them and make sure they're dead centered. Right now they got a little bit of, these look nicer. But I'm going to let that epoxy dry a little bit and then I'm going to clean that up. And let's show you how we do this. Okay, so we put enough epoxy on there that we should get some squeeze out. You see that one's got a little bit of squeeze out? They should all have a little bit of squeeze out. Some a little more than others. Squeeze out is not a big deal, right? Not a problem. Take a look at the ones that have been sat up for a while. I've cleaned some of the squeeze out off of that. But just like any adhesives, right? They work better if you can get the two pieces of metal closer to each other. So when you set this in, you really got to lean on it, because you want to get that as close to the parent metal as possible. Now, I've never actually done this before, but I've seen it done plenty of times. Just that this case, there was just too much movement to let it fly with just the cups. So I'm going to epoxy them in place. Think about it this way, that the forces to move that cup back and forth should not be very high. Okay? That epoxy should never break. If anything ever happens, then it would have been a full valve float scenario, which at the spring load we're putting it all together with would be well over 7,000 RPM. Now, the spring load that came from Jones Cam was a 6,500 RPM max. So going 10 pounds over, let's face it, you know, the guy that's going to get this is going to be running at 6,500 for a while, and then he's going to take it for a spin at 7,000 and realize it's faster, and that's where he's going to be shifting from now on. So let's set it up for about 7,000 to begin with. Okay, so you make sure you got a good amount of fill around the bronze guide itself. Now you can let that dry a little bit, and then it's easy to take the extra epoxy off. That's how I think I'm going to clean these up. The other ones I spent plenty of time trying to get the epoxy off when it was wet with like a paper towel. It was a real pain, because if you throw off your centering, right? You throw off your centering while you're cleaning it, it doesn't really help. You know what I mean? Alright guys, that's all I got for you. Let me know how many times you've ever had to do this or anything like this. You know, if you cut the spring seat deeper into the head, you have to be careful because there's, you know, water under there. You may not need a spring cup at all. You know, a lot of the small block Fords have that big boss that comes up, and that centers the spring from the inside. That's fine. I've had, I forget what they even call them, but I've used, it's basically a shim with an edge on the inside that centers the spring. But something like this, that's a dual spring, you really don't want to center it on the little tiny internal spring. You want to center it on the 1.43 spring. Alright guys, I know there was a couple other things I wanted to tell you, but I can't remember what they are. I know what it is, hold on. Alright, final flows for the GT40p. Okay, now this is after everything has been done, finesse, the valves are done, they're shaped the way I wanted them shaped, they got the right back cut on the intake, the exhaust valve was radiused, I did all the chambers the way I wanted to, I got everything equalized the way I wanted to, and then I just pick one out of the bunch and I'll flow it, and this is our final flows. Now, are these better or worse than the last time we did it? I have no idea. And I'm too beat to even think about it. But the cam, how much of a lift is in the cam? It's got a decent sized cam in it. So it's over 500 a lift, I'm sure. So we can calculate it up on a 500 lift, or even go to 600. Right in there. It's right around almost 240 CFM on the intake, which is no joke. I don't remember if I CC'd these. I don't believe the CC has changed since last time I CC'd them. I'll tell you that much. Okay. And the exhaust is unbelievably tiny, but if you put a decent-sized pipe on it, it flows plenty. And our swirl curve is pretty decent. It's got a little bit of a dead spot around 0.25, but I'm not really worried about that. And the swirl is actually quite high, around 600,000. We got 3,500, which is probably more than we need. Now, what I probably should have done is I should have tested that with the intake manifold on. I think we did that before, and it knocks that swirl back a little bit, because this is going to get that ported off Victor Jr. that I did up. In any case, if we take a look at our speeds, our pinch is really good. Our cylinder roof is pretty good. I would have liked to got them a little bit evener, but I was not able to. And our floor is actually quite good. It's fast, yeah, but you can only do so much because you run out of casting. Still, super stable. You know, keeps going up as far as flow. Worked out well. The exhaust, for the size of it, is really good. Okay? All right. 300 plus up top, 300 plus in the middle, and decent flows even on the bottom. Now, the bottom center was completely dead at one point, I believe, right? So now we're 155. So it's got a big step up everywhere. Now, these are 1.9 intakes, 1.6 exhaust, and they've got 50-degree cuts on both. I think next time somebody asks me to do a set of GT40Ps, I think I'm going to go right to the 194s, because we get a little more meat right in the middle of the lift curve. And I like the little extra meat in the middle of the lift curve. I don't think it does anything for the higher lifts, but I'll take that mid-range anytime. Alright guys, thanks for hanging out. Have a good night.